collectible popcorn buckets. Andrew, how many do you have?
0.
No, you have.
No.
I know you've got Ghostbusters.
I have at least 2 Ghostbusters ones. Yes, you're right. I take that back.
You got the Ecto one and the trap thing?
I have 2 different trap ones.
Oh, okay. Didn't they make an Ecto one? We put it in the bag?
They did, but I didn't care.
Okay.
Because like the trap ones are like full size. So like, because I got one right here. So the trap ones are basically like trap props almost. So like they're like full size 1-to-1 like traps. So you could almost use them as props if you wanted. Yeah, that was the motivation behind getting those. Most of the other, like the Ecto one, I had no desire to own a model of an Ecto one.
Now, did you buy these at the theater or like secondhand eBay?
At the theater.
Okay.
Oh, so this one I got, the one I just showed you that has like that actually went to like some lengths to create something for the popcorn to actually sit in. That one I bought at the theater. This one up here was just this. So like it's just a trap and it opens up and that's cool and everything, but like
it's like 2 handfuls of popcorn.
Yeah, like it's super tiny. Like there's just nowhere to put popcorn in it. How does this even work? There it is. Yeah. So like, and this one like lights up. They all light up. It's cool. But like,
that's pretty cool.
Like, so for these, there was a sense of like, oh, I could like throw this on, like if I wanted to take a trap somewhere that wasn't, the $300 light up fancy one that I have, I could throw these on the belt and it would look just as good to any normal person passing by. But this one was from a different theater and my friend actually got me this one, but that was more of like an exchange where like I got him that one and sent it to him and then he got me this one and sent it to me. So
okay.
But otherwise I don't really partake.
So many of them that are like a character's head and like with a big mouth. I'm like, there's like no room for popcorn.
Yeah.
And I think
you're bad. You're bad at the one thing you're designed to do.
Exactly. And like they literally have to serve you the collectible thing and like a normal bucket of popcorn because like that's not going to be enough to justify the price. So it's like, so I've never got into it, but friend of the show, my wife, just saw that there's going to be a Devil Wears Prada 2 collectible popcorn bucket.
Is it a giant heel?
It's a handbag, which she's like, all right, well, I need that. And I had the idea. I was like, well, we have family movie night at the house every Wednesday. We always make popcorn. It'd be kind of cool if all of us had like our own little funny bucket. And I was like, all right, I guess we should probably start knocking these out then. We're gonna go see Super Mario Galaxy opening day, and I'm just assuming there's got to be a collectible popcorn bucket for that.
I presume, yes.
So probably get that one for the little guy, and keep my eyes peeled. If something catches my eye, I think I'm actually gonna snag one of these popcorn buckets. Join the craze. Oddly, I saw a Super Mario Galaxy popcorn tin at Target. And I was like, what do you do? You take this to the theater? Like, what are we doing with selling this in a store?
We used to do selling something for profit at a store.
You know what I'm saying.
I'm seeing if the popcorn bucket. Oh, so apparently they have been revealed, several of them. So there is a Yoshi one apparently.
Cinemark shop Yoshi, with the egg.
Yeah,
it's pretty good.
It's pretty good. Regal. There's also.
Do you think you crack open the egg and it says "This is America"?
I hope.
Any voice?
Looks like there's a whole bunch of. I was wondering if they might do the question mark box as a, or was that for the first one? Did they do that for the first one?
I'm seeing one for the first one.
Yeah, so the Yoshi one is the only one I'm seeing now. That seems to be the only one that's like making a bunch of waves.
Yeah, and it looks like that's Cinemark, currently. Which is the theater we go to. So, sure, yeah, let's do it.
Yeah, it looks like looks like they just did a metal
$50
4-sided. Oh yeah,
it's on the Cinemark shop for $50. Those don't cost $50, do they?
Couldn't tell you.
How much did you pay for your Ghostbusters?
Well, they light up and do all sorts of weird shit, so they were like $40. But
$50.
well,
guess.
I see this one. It's the Super Mario Brothers. It's the question mark. They did a square tin, and it was the question marks on the side. It was $15, and it included a large popcorn. How the times have changed, man. Tariffs.
Yeah, since the first movie released. All right. Well, I will report back. I'll put a picture in the Discord. The popcorn buckets we find. Do you see the Super Mario popcorn tin with lid? $9.99 at Target. So I was just making fun of it. So hell, maybe I will end up getting that if it's only $10. All right. Let's hit that theme song.
We're not talking about the best of them. We're just talking about the rest of them.
Not the worst parts, but the best parts. And the best parts we have. The best of the rest.
Hello and welcome to Best of the Rest. My name is Chris Logan, and I am joined, as always, by my co-host, played by Andrew Williams. Say something to the listeners, Andrew.
Hold on. No, I already did the 5 guns. All right. Yeah. Hey, everybody. Thanks.
I didn't mean to put you on the spot like that. I know that was totally a surprise that I was going to ask you to say something. And
yeah, I know. It's just, you're running into props.
Each week, we take a second look at a movie that was poorly received upon release and challenge ourselves to only talk about the things we like and what the movie does well. This is the farewell tour. And this week, we are talking the 2007 film, I'm Not There. Andrew, let me ask you a question now I don't know the answer to. What is your history with this movie? Have you seen it before this week preparing for this podcast?
Nope. No. Nothing. Zero. Zilch.
How about
Nada.
just your awareness of the movie? Do you remember marketing?
You have
coming
told
out?
me it existed.
Okay. I talked about it nonstop. Got it.
I did not see anything when this came out. This was 2007. So I was in my second year of college. I wasn't quite as plugged into movies as I am now, and didn't go see them nearly as much yet. Like, this is a this is a post 9/11, pre Dark Knight world. So it's the Dark Ages, as it's called. So I wasn't really like paying a lot of attention to movies at the time. I still was, but like not in the sense that I do now, and even within like 5 years later. But yeah, and then obviously just not being generally a huge fan of Bob Dylan, I don't think it really hit any kind of marks for me either. And it also feels like this was a kind of smaller release. Obviously, we'll talk about the box office and stuff in a second, but it doesn't make a lot of waves commercially. So I don't know if there was limited release or a limited focus or limited marketing budget, but this has never crossed my radar until you told me about it.
I don't know if it ever releases wide. We'll look at box office in a minute and maybe we'll see. I don't think so. This movie was huge for me. I mean, in high school, I discovered Bob Dylan. It was me. I discovered him. First one. I got really into Bob Dylan. And almost to an obsessive amount, certainly to a greater degree than I get into anything now as a grown man with no time. Like, I got this book here that I'm holding up to the camera. This is The Essential Interviews. It's basically every interview Bob Dylan ever did for Rolling Stone magazine. And I read this cover to cover. So I already had a sense of like the mythos of Bob Dylan and the way he transforms and evades and eludes and remakes himself and reinvents himself continuously throughout his career, and the different eras of Dylan. I was super into it, loved the music, and then I hear about this movie, and this was a trailer that I watched literally on a daily basis. This and the Dark Knight trailer. I would like every evening. I would just watch them and obsess over like every frame and get super hyped about it. And when this came out, this was November of '07. I had to go to the Angelica Theater downtown Houston. Cool art house theater, no longer there. It's just an AMC now. I think I've said this on mic before, but it really sucks that we don't have that. Saw a lot of cool stuff there, including this movie, which, like I said, I don't think ever got a wide release. So had it not been for that theater, it would have been a while before I got to see this. Saw it in theaters, was blown away. I loved it. I've revisited it several times over the years. Had the DVD as soon as it came out. I've watched it with audio commentary. I've done deep dives. Watching it again for this week was the first time I've watched it in quite a while, though. But I've seen it a lot. It is genuinely one of my favorite movies of all time, somewhere in the top 5 probably, and kind of interesting because if you know me at all, Andrew, which I feel like you do, and like my taste in movies, this is a little more abstract than what I'm normally into, but for me, it totally works. No doubt, in part because I really enjoy Bob Dylan's music and I know a lot about his career, and it's easier for me to connect the dots and kind of see what's happening there. And I've always wondered what would it be like to dive into this movie if you don't have that pre-existing knowledge or that pre-existing interest in Bob Dylan. So getting you to sit down and watch this movie, it's the reason we're doing it here on the Farewell Tour. I wanted to pick this and pick your brain and kind of see what you take away from it. And I was not expecting it to land in your top 10 or anything like that, but I would love to hear the perspective, and that's what we'll be doing this episode. But first, let's set the stage here. The movie's originally released November 21st, 2007. It's made on a budget of $20 million. At the box office, it brings in $11.7 million. Which, quick pause, I'm kind of curious if that is like expected, if it's considered a success, a failure. Like I said, it never opens wide. Did they expect it to eventually gain traction? Like, this movie just doesn't have broad appeal. I was even surprised the budget was $20 million. I expected like 10, because there's nothing too flashy going on except for like a insane cast. But I just, with the somewhat limited appeal, I was kind of curious. I don't know how they felt about that box office return. I would imagine DVD, nature as it is, it eventually breaks even and becomes profitable, but can't say for sure. Critically, it is well received. 76% critic score on Rotten Tomatoes. Audience score is positive, and I know I'm not super plugged into like Bob Dylan fandom, but a cursory glance through like Reddit, I think among Bob Dylan fans, I think it's also pretty highly regarded.
Cool.
That's the reception. Andrew, anything about the box office you want to dive into?
Yeah, it made $11 million, which is not a lot for a $20 million production. It's $4 million domestic, 7.6 international. You look at its domestic weekend, it opened Thanksgiving 27. That's how you say 2007.
I didn't know
27. It's not wrong for some reason.
2007.
So the Thanksgiving 5-day weekend, it makes $974,000. Just shy of $975,000. So that's its opening weekend. It doesn't have a single weekend above $1 million in the United States.
Like $11 of that opening weekend was me. I did my part.
Oh, hey, and I'm sure they appreciate what you've done. Number one release that same weekend is Enchanted, which opened to $49 million.
Hey, I love that movie. It's a good time.
Also, August Rush, The Mist, the Frank Darabont, The Mist opens at the exact same time. Hitman, This Christmas, which I don't even know if I know that one. Made $26 million. Jesus, I don't even know if I know this. Anyway, like I said, its biggest weekend is that opening weekend, and that's the Thanksgiving 5 day. So that's giving it like the 5 days of Thanksgiving, as opposed to, I guess, the 3 days of normal things. But only makes 730,000 on the 3 day, drops to less than 500,000 its second weekend, and just it's not a success. The international stuff is a little tougher to parse out. The United Kingdom, it does decently well its first couple of weekends, another couple 100,000, but just box office wise, it's almost impressive that it gets to what it did, because it is really just like a slow inkling, crawling to all of this money that it gets. So impressive in a way that it was able to pull that off, but definitely not recouping its budget, and definitely not what you presume anybody was hoping for.
The movie is written and directed by Todd Hayne. There is an additional writing credit from Oren Moverman. We can talk about him briefly. He is a screenwriter who has since turned also into a director and a pretty successful producer. Lots of credits under his name now. The one that jumped out to me, just because of the Reddit meme, is he's the writer and director of Rampart. Andrew, do you remember that?
Woody Harrelson, right?
Debacle. Do you remember that debacle? I couldn't remember the word debacle. Do you remember the debacle? Woody Harrelson did an AMA, ask me anything on Reddit. And it's notorious because anytime someone asked anything not related to the movie he was promoting, he would just try to redirect him back to Rampart. So much so that people just guessed it's probably not actually Woody Harrelson. Someone was like, dude, Woody, do you remember when you crashed my high school after prom and we did this, and this? And he was like, I'm actually really only here to answer questions about Rampart, where it's an ask me anything. Lots of fun memes out of that, picture of Woody Harrelson that's like, sorry, I can't help you with your F-150. I just have these Ramparts. And good old internet stuff. But that's the legacy of that movie to me. I have no idea if it's good or anything, but this is the writer and director of that. As
Rampart
for
was a massive police corruption scandal, so even if the movie's good, I'm sure it's a tough watch.
As for Todd Hayne, the main creative force here, I am very embarrassed to say I've never watched another Todd Haynes movie. Even though I absorbed everything about this movie, I've seen a lot of interviews with the guy, and his work is very well regarded, well received. I've bought a lot of them. I have Far From Heaven. I just haven't watched it. Julianne Moore is kind of seems to be his muse. She's in almost all of his work. May December came out a few years ago to, again, very well received. Carol with Cate Blanchett and Rooney Mara might be his most well known, but he kind of exists in a Richard Linklater space where it's a little bit above student film art house type stuff, but he kind of just flirts with being mainstream or broad appeal, but always gets clearly talented actors want to work with the guy. He's always got knockout casts in every project that he does. He's got a movie that's coming out probably early next year called De Noche with Mark Ruffalo will be reuniting with. He worked on him with another film, but I don't know. I need to dive into his filmography because like I said, they all get great reviews. I love this movie. It's one of my favorites. I don't know why I've never made myself watch another movie of his, but I don't know. It is what it is.
Yeah, it's an interesting filmography, and May December I feel like got a bunch of attention when it came out too, and that was Natalie Portman. And you're never going to guess Julianne Moore. But he also did a really, really good documentary on the Velvet Underground back in 21. Genuinely just a fantastic documentary.
Okay.
And the Velvet Underground are a band I struggle with because I say this as nicely as I can. I think I like what the Velvet Underground represent more than I actually like listening to their music. And I feel similarly about Lou Reed. Transformer by Lou Reed is a fantastic album. I love that album. It's genuine. That's, Satellite of Love, Walk on the Wild Side, genuinely great album. Almost everything else he's done, I'm just kind of like, I can't follow you here, man. Like I can't do this with you. Like I don't know what this is. Sometimes it's true, and sometimes it was Lou Reed just being like, I want to make an album that, like, he was like testing the limits of his own critical appeal by like, I'm going to purposely make something that sounds like scratching noise and watch people say it's really, really good when they're clearly wrong. Like, so Lou Reed gets to very weird spots, but that documentary that kind of dives into it lives in that space where I think it allows people to appreciate what they've done and what they kind of represented in that time. You know, their involvement with Andy Warhol and all sorts of stuff like that. And it actually informs Charlie XCX, who just did the soundtrack to the movie Wuthering Heights by Emerald Fennell. She got John Cale from the Velvet Underground to be on one of the tracks. And it was in part, she saw that documentary. And since he's one of the only ones that's still alive, she like sent him the music she was working on and the demos for the movie. And so he actually like wrote back and like gave his thoughts on what she was doing, to the point that he ended up contributing some like spoken word stuff to one of the tracks. So Todd Haynes bringing people together, bringing those Gen Z in touch with God, John Cale might not even be a boomer. He might be a silent generation, but bridging that gap everywhere you can. But yeah, it's interesting. Yeah, it's a little bit of that Richard Linklater. I don't like comparing people to him just because he sucks, but David O. Russell, similar vibe I get at times, just very smaller projects that get really, really strong casts. I have seen Dark Waters just because I was in I was in that like Spotlight Big Short. I want to watch devastating movies about the corruption of major corporations and
Sure.
people trying to fight that. And so Dark Waters is very, very good. Tim Robbins, Mark Ruffalo. So he's really, really great. And it is interesting though, because this feels a little bit different than almost anything I feel like he's done otherwise. It's definitely, there's definitely a swing here that I think is beyond a lot of what he normally does and a lot of what normally anybody does, especially, you know, and we'll talk about this more later, I'm sure. But just when you talk about music, biopics, whatever, you know, Walk Hard kind of should have closed the door on the very classic biopic, but yet that version is still persisted. And this movie, I think, does stand in like a stark contrast. And this is right before Walk Hard. I think Walk Hard was 08 or 09, or maybe it was earlier. I don't remember. But it's obviously a movie that's not content with just telling the story in a very conventional way. And so I can very much respect that about this effort, that he was not content to just be like, and here's a movie about Bob Dylan in the 60s, because that's just not interesting.
It's one reason that I have zero interest in seeing A Complete Unknown. The other reason is I can't make myself care about Timothée Chalamet, #PP, I'm sorry. But I love Bob Dylan. I love, what's his name, the director?
James Mangold.
Logan. Yeah, I love James Mangold stuff. Like, I would probably like it if I sit down and watch it, but like, I already have the ideal, the perfect Bob Dylan biopic. I don't know if I want to see a more conventional version, which I assume it is. I'm sure it's good, but it's hard for me to like muster up any willpower to watch that thing. But I agree. Like I watched this movie and I'm like, this is such an interesting way to do not just a music biopic, but a biography of anyone, because the way it's structured, like, it makes so much sense for exploring Bob Dylan. So like, I don't think you should approach every artist with this way. Like, I don't think, you know, Ray Charles or Johnny Cash, I'm trying to think of some of their biography movies that have been made. I don't think they should all be like a cast of 5 or 6 people playing different characters based on, like, I don't think it works for everybody. But like, find a take that's unique to that person and explore it. I love that this does it. But also at the same time, I can recognize, like, this movie made $11 million. Like, this doesn't have broad appeal that you need to tell the story. So I get why it hasn't taken hold. Have you seen Better Man, the Robbie Williams
The monkey
Biopic?
movie, no.
Yeah, I haven't watched it yet.
I have heard people say that it's genuinely good.
Yeah, that's what I've heard
It's like
too.
genuinely great. Like it is like because it came out, I feel like right around the same time. Maybe it was in A Complete Unknown was coming out right around the same time, and there was a lot of comparisons. But like, the biggest thing for me that I think hurt that movie is I just don't think most Americans know who Robbie Williams is.
I agree 1000%. I know Millennium. He had that one hit song that reached over here, but
I know
don't
he's
know
in
anything
Take
about
That,
his.
and like that's it. Like he wasn't Take That.
Yeah.
But like I don't even know Take That really. Like that's mostly just from Diffusion that I've learned that, and it's like it's something where like, but yeah, I heard that it was great. I heard that it was like really good and like a genuinely like unique portrayal on like a way to make it different and not just kind of cycle the same stories. But if
anybody doesn't know, it is a movie about the life of Robbie Williams, but Robbie Williams is played by a CG monkey, and it's not acknowledged by anyone in the movie. He just is a monkey. It looks wild. I've seen a lot of stuff about the VFX. The Corridor guys have broken it down, and it looks phenomenal from a technical standpoint. But yeah, I want to dive into that. I love big swings like that. You mentioned Dark Waters, Andrew. Thumbs up, good. I mean, you said it was like heavy, but like, yeah. I think now that I'm thinking about it, Patrick Willems did a video on documents movies, just movies about people just brushing through documents in an office, like All the President's Men and Zodiac.
Spotlight, Zodiac, like all of them, like.
Yeah, so
there's a subgenre. Like, there's like newspaper movie. People talk about like newspaper movie, which is All the President's Men, Spotlight, the paper, things like that. The Post. They're newspaper movies where like it's just people in a newspaper, it's just people in a newspaper combing through documents, putting together a story. But they're part of like the subgenre of document movies where it's just documents. And like any legal thriller, anything like that is all basically documents movies.
It's thrilling. It's somehow
it is
very exciting.
You can make it can be very good, and it can also be very boring. It's one of those things where like you can make a good document movie and you can make a bad one. Like there are bad newspaper movies, but it's but yeah, Dark Waters is good. It's just again, you're kind of reminded that we've let a lot of really rich, powerful people get away with a lot of stuff.
Yep. Andrew, let's talk about this movie, which I find far less depressing than that idea. Let's talk about I'm Not There, all the positives, everything we like about the movie. Andrew, you ready?
Sure.
Six interwoven stories all represent the life of Bob Dylan. A young boy named Woody Guthrie plays traditional folk and blues tunes while crossing the South in a boxcar. A documentary follows the career of Jack Rollins, a folk hero turned pastor. The poet Arthur Rimbaud gives cryptic answers in an ongoing interview. Robbie Clark is an actor that hit the big time portraying Jack Rollins in a biographical film and now finds himself in a deteriorating marriage. Jude Quinn is a 60s musician caught up in the fast life of sex, drugs, and rock and roll who is in a never-ending battle with the media that wants to define them. And Billy the Kid is a notorious outlaw in hiding after faking their own death. It would have been foolish for me to try to walk through this movie beginning to end. So there's just kind of a quick summary of the different stories that are being told. We jump from one character to another. And watching it back this time, it plays out relatively linearly in the life of Bob Dylan. Like Woody Guthrie is like early stage Bob Dylan. And so most of his scenes are in the beginning versus Billy the Kid, Richard Gere's part, mostly plays at the end. So we kind of go chronological through his life, but there is a lot of bouncing around. And especially the Robbie Clark part, the Heath Ledger part. Like every time we jump into that story, sometimes it's the beginning, it's the end. That one's really bounces around. But a pretty hard to describe structure and narrative. Like just saying it's non-linear almost doesn't even begin to cut it. Like there's random title cards that aren't consistent. There's a narrator that is only in very small part of the movie. It's a little bit all over the place. It really feels like 6 different films spliced together, each one with their own style, their own visual style, their own characteristics, the different
to the point that if this weren't about Bob Dylan, I feel like you'd hate this. Like it's the type of movie that I feel
1,000%,
like-
1,000%.
I feel like
I mean,
you definitely don't enjoy. Like honestly, I'm watching this movie and the way it all plays together. I was like, this is like David Lynch, and like you don't care for David Lynch. Like it's like obviously it's more palatable. I think it's way easier to see what the goal is here because the movie's not shy about it being about Bob Dylan, so it's easy enough to see how it kind of all clicks together. Whereas David Lynch, you're all just kind of sitting there going collectively like, "Ha." But
if Bob
but
Dylan
yeah.
didn't exist and this was not based on a real life person, you're right. I would probably hate it. But he does exist.
That's not a fair
and
question.
So,
Yeah,
exactly.
It's like if the circumstances regarding this movie were completely different, you probably wouldn't like it. Well,
Yeah,
yeah, probably.
But I think there's a very interesting conversation to be had where there's not a real answer to this, but I kind of want to hear, we'll get to the actual show in a second. What's a fair amount of information you can expect an audience to bring in when they watch a movie? You know what I'm saying? Like,
Mhm.
here's a pretty easy example. Like, Inglourious Bastards, you should probably know that that's not how Hitler died, right? Before you watch that movie.
Probably.
Like, that's
Which
not
is what's
the actual
surprising
events
about
of
it.
World
That's
War
part
II.
of what's surprising about it is that it is the event. It's, you're expecting it to not work because Hitler doesn't die that way, and the movie subverts that.
So
That
I think everyone agrees it's fair to assume the adult audience watching that knows enough about historical events to realize it's being subverted. It's like, that's fair. But
Yes.
where is that line? You know, like, should this movie, should it appeal to someone who doesn't know who Bob Dylan is or think about him? Or is it okay that, like, you should be a Bob Dylan fan to get the most out of this? Where is, especially with like historical pieces or anything based on real life, I think is where you ask this question a lot. Like, how much do we assume? How much do we explain?
I think it's a tough thing, but at the same time, it's like, it's you look at something like James Gunn's Superman. It's like, okay, he should be making this making this movie for people who don't like Superman? Like, is it like, at what point does your project need to concern itself with its focus? Because the age-old saying, I think, is still true, of that if you try to appeal to everyone, you appeal to no one. Right. Like, it's, if you spend all your time trying to be like, oh, let's find a way to make this information completely palatable to every single person that exists, you're just going to fail. Led Zeppelin didn't write music that everybody liked. They left that for the Bee Gees. But it's a problem that I think is real in a sense, but at the same time, I feel like, generally speaking, like, if you're going to make a movie about Bob Dylan, like, I think for this type of movie, I think if you're not the biggest fan of Bob Dylan, or I'd say even a passing fan of Bob Dylan, I think the movie is still very interesting. It was very interesting for me to watch it, but it obviously isn't going to resonate with me the same way that it does for somebody like you. But that's not a problem, I don't think. Like, you're not meant to not every single person is meant to get the same thing out of every piece of art. And that's part of what makes art, is that you can't just, like, you can't expect you and I to watch a movie. Like, it would be like us watching a movie about King Crimson or something like that. Like, I'm going to have a very different experience with a movie about King Crimson than probably anybody else on the planet, barring the members of King Crimson. Like, it's that sort of thing where, like, but I wouldn't expect people to have that reaction. But if somebody were to go in, like, if there's, like, there was a 50th anniversary documentary that came out about King Crimson. And, the guy making that, I'm sure, was kind of like, well, yeah, if you're going to watch a documentary about King Crimson, you probably need to care about King Crimson. Like, he's not going to approach that documentary from, like, a perspective of, like, all right, let me make a vast, wide-reaching documentary that appeals to every single person, even the ones that haven't heard of King Crimson. Like, you have to start somewhere. And I'm glad it's not my job. That's all I can say. I'm glad it's not my responsibility to parse through and figure it out, because it does sound like a difficult thing.
I mean, even pulling away from like the historical aspect, we have Avengers Doomsday on the horizon.
Yep.
How much is that movie going to expect that you've seen the previous Avengers movies or the Marvel TV shows or no characters from the comics? Like, is it going to have to give us a brief background on a character that's technically already appeared somewhere else? Or do you have to know how She-Hulk ended? Or, like, is Wonder Man going to stroll onto the screen halfway through and expect you to know who it is? Like, what is reasonable? And that line's probably different for everybody, and I agree with you. Like, I'm glad I'm not the person that is expected to do that. I love, bring up James Gunn's Superman. I love that movie for having Hot Girl and Mr. Terrific and not giving us their origin. They're just there, and you learn by watching them do
I thought
what
you
they
said
do.
Hot Girl and was really confused.
Would have been a Freudian slip, but I did not.
I was like, you're like Hot Girl and Mr. Terrific, and it doesn't show us their origins. I was like, wait, what?
Her origin is that her parents are both very attractive.
Yeah, that's it.
All right, let's dive into this movie. But first, Andrew, we're going to talk about this extraordinary cast, and we're going to start with the best casting of the movie. Because every episode we recognize one person who goes so far above and beyond to Call of Duty that they actually elevate the quality of the entire film with a performance. And we recognize that person by giving them the Mark Strong Award. So, Andrew, go ahead and start us off here. Who's getting your Mark Strong Award for I'm Not There?
This is a tough one because I think there's a lot of people doing a lot of really good stuff here. Obviously, Cate Blanchett garnered a wide variety of awards and nominations for her portrayal in this film. But I think the thing that stood out to me the most is I'm going to be going Marcus Carl Franklin as Woody Guthrie.
Ooh, I love this
as my Mark Strong, because first off, obviously this is a bit of a radical choice given that Marcus Carl Franklin is a POC. Obviously this movie's not playing by any established rules, obviously given the fact that Cate Blanchett is also one of the personas here, but he's kind of the focus of the first third of this movie. And so his responsibility is pretty heavy in getting that audience engaged with this story and making sure that that part of the story is being told very well. And I think they do a tremendous job of engaging the audience, playing well with the material, playing well off of the other actors and all the scenes that they're in, and holding their own in just a way that's very difficult, especially not just being a younger actor in a film like this, but with the weight of that on their shoulders. And I think they're up to the task in every single regard. They do obviously feature lesser and lesser in the movie as it moves on, simply because this is meant to be kind of the beginning of Dylan's life. That's what this character is meant to represent. But I think Marcus does a tremendous job sitting in that space and making it feel layered and heavy like it's supposed to. So, yeah, I'm going to go that direction. It may be a surprise to some people, but that's how I'm playing it.
I absolutely love this pick. I mean, especially this watch, I was just really astounded by how good of an actor this young man is. Which, God, I sound so old saying that. But, we've talked about kid actors a lot on our podcast, and we would never trash a kid actor. But it's kind of a mixed bag what you get from kids, and especially when you're asking something of them like this, which is not playing a typical kid. But I think he's tremendous. I think he holds his own against this star-studded cast. I think you don't watch this and think, oh, his segments are kind of weak because he's the lead. Like, he absolutely carries them. And he is the one doing the singing. So, like, he's multi-talented, singing these traditional blues tracks on the soundtrack. And, yeah, I'm really taken with this performance. I've tried to look through their filmography. I don't see anything too recent from them, but I really feel like this is, assuming they're still in the game and still pursuing acting, I feel like they would be definitely able to translate into an adult actor just with their talent. So I'd love to see them come back in some capacity and something else now that they've grown up a bit. But yeah, I love this performance. I think this is a great pick. And yes, Marcus Carl Franklin plays Woody Guthrie. That's the character's name, and it is acknowledged in the movie itself. Like in the movie itself, Woody Guthrie, the folk singer, exists. He just has the same name as Woody Guthrie. And like you mentioned, they are a person of color. Woody Guthrie is a young black boy, and I can't help but be reminded of Steve Martin in The Jerk.
I was
The
born a
opening
young
line
black
of
child.
that movie. He's born a young black child, a poor black child. And it's very interesting. I remember, I think this is from the audio commentary, Todd Haynes saying he heard a criticism that like he didn't in the movie reflect Bob Dylan's influence, being influenced by black artists. And he's like, I cast a black actor to play him. Like, I don't know how much more obvious I can be. I thought that was pretty spot on. But Woody Guthrie, he represents Bob Dylan's early life, early career, but sort of the myth of it and the lie of it. Bob Dylan didn't actually travel the South. He didn't grow up struggling or poor. He didn't do. He's the myth. He's caught up in traditional folk, traditional blues, not really writing from his own life. And that's the lesson that Woody Guthrie, the character, learns throughout his segment. He gets called out on it by a black woman in the South that says, what are you doing singing about boxcars and the Depression? Like, live your own time. This is the 50s. Like, we have civil unrest. There is current struggles that you should be on your mind. And he takes that to heart, and that's the arc here. And it ends with Woody Guthrie, the actual Woody Guthrie, the singer, dying in a hospital, which was a big impact on Bob Dylan's life. And that's sort of the end of the traditional folk era. But even if you're not putting that together, like it's you're obviously a very talented young kid. It's a fascinating little short story if you take it on its own. I guess I'll save it for scenes, but it's maybe 15 minutes into the movie when Woody Guthrie falls into a river and gets swallowed by a whale. And I remember at that point I was being like, this is where people hit eject if they're not vibing with the movie, because this is so wild and so weird. I'll come back to that. But first, I got to give out my Mark Strong Award. And man, it's tough. I love Marcus Carl. I love this cast. It could go anywhere. I wouldn't call you crazy. But I'm going to do what's probably the obvious one and give it to Cate Blanchett, who plays Jude Quinn. And in a lot of ways, this is the most one-to-one with Bob Dylan. It's based on an era of his life that is very well documented. There's a documentary called Don't Look Back, which is from this very tour that's being depicted. And the look he has here is probably the most classic Bob Dylan look, with the shaggy hair, the dark glasses, the black clothes. And even though it's the most one-to-one, he's being played by a woman. So even then, like we're getting some artistry in here and some taking some swings. I don't want to speak for anybody else, but I almost forget that this is being played by a woman at times. Like I lose track. I buy into it, and what Cate Blanchett, way she transforms into this role, and the mannerisms that she has down, and her voice, which isn't like hilariously low pitched trying to sound like a man. She finds this like middle ground, and is clearly strung out and just like a raw nerve the entire time they're on screen. It is an electrifying performance. It is so good. Shout out Cate Blanchett, my number one crush. Beautiful. I love everything this woman does. Even when she's playing Bob Dylan, I'm like,
this better not awaken anything in me.
Yeah. But I love the story that's played out here, which is sort of Bob Dylan's struggle with the media and trying to be pinned down, all while living this continuously rock and roll lifestyle. But man, Cate Blanchett. This casting definitely got all the headlines, and there's so much about this movie, I can't say like I understand every decision. I understand most of it and how it relates to Bob Dylan, but like again, I think in the auto commentary, Todd Hayne says, I always knew this era of Bob Dylan, I would cast a female to play the role. And he does it. He pulls a David Lynch and doesn't elaborate anymore. I don't know why he feels that this section be played by a woman. I don't know if it's something to do with like a vulnerability he wanted to see or a slight figure. I don't know. I can't say for sure, but I see it on screen and it works.
It's just unfortunate that he went in with such a strict agenda to cast a woman in this part. It's just
so woke.
very unfortunate that he just didn't let the process of auditioning every actor on the planet play out to determine who he wanted to play this role. It just really means that, guys, I'm kidding. Please don't. I'm obviously mimicking other instances, much more high profile, where directors set out to cast women and they were met with that level of vitriol. But it is a very good performance. And I think the only reason this didn't hit more for me is because, well, this is Dylan's class. I think looking at it from all the different angles, like this era of Dylan, which is so kind of controversial, basically the electric Dylan is essentially what this version is. It's the decision to go electric at a folk festival, the backlash to that, the overall struggle with fame that Dylan struggled with in the mid to late 60s and the early 70s. And just that piece of Dylan's life, which, like you said, has been documented probably the most out of any era of Dylan's career. Probably that seems to have the most attention because it was so controversial. So this performance being the center of that, I think naturally becomes like a lightning rod for the movie in a lot of ways, where it's going to get the most attention in a way. And it's also the one that's kind of portrayed, like you said, the most one-to-one almost, where like it's the look, it's the circumstances, it's the environment. It's the most Bob Dylan of all the things in this movie that are happening. It's the section of the movie, I think, that's not trying to like hide from it. Not that any section is hiding from it, but it's the one where it's the most obvious. And so this is like peak, like, I don't want to be what you define me as, man. Like, I'm not part of your system. This is that whole thing, but like not in a jokey, ironic, I threw it on the ground way, but like in a very real, this is what Dylan was feeling at the time, that there were these expectations on what he was supposed to be doing. And like, you need to be writing your songs about the right things that matter, and you need to be focusing on these sorts of things. And do you feel like you betrayed the fans that loved you before? And like, it was when he felt all of those expectations collapsing on him, and a lesser man might have truly collapsed under all of those. Like in this movie, the character of Jude does not survive. Sorry, spoilers for this almost 20-year-old movie.
You know what's funny about that? Just since you brought it up, I know we're not scenes yet, but yeah, the last thing we see of Jude is they get into a motorcycle accident. I never read it as Jude dying until like I was reading through the Wikipedia, and it says, like, I read the synopsis and it says Jude dies in a car. I was like, huh. Like, I guess that makes sense, but I never read it that way. It's not super explicit, but yeah, the last thing you see is them lying on the side of the road after the motorcycle accident. But I don't know. Interesting.
Yeah, anyway, yeah, and that obviously is referencing a very real motorcycle accident that Bob Dylan was in, which did not end up taking his life, which cannot be said about Duane Allman and Barry Oakley and several others musicians at the time who were in very fatal motorcycle accidents. Barry Oakley was the bass player for the Allman Brothers, for anybody who doesn't understand that, doesn't know who he is. But this is definitely, and then, like I said, this is the performance that got a lot of the attention for the movie. This is the one that got nominated for a lot of awards. This got an Academy Award nomination. Didn't win, but of all the things happening in this movie, Cate Blanchett as this version of Bob Dylan is the one that got like awards nominations.
Yeah, and her silhouette is the poster, which is
right,
wild.
Like,
that it's a woman on the poster for Bob Dylan.
Well, and it is, and like I said, it's the one that's, like you said, it's the most 1-to-1. So I think this is an easy thing to pick, as far as, not easy in the sense that like it's an easy thing to decide, but just, you know, it's a very iconic performance from this movie. It's the most notable. It's the one that got the most attention. And I think, and a lot of that is for a very good reason. It's a very good portrayal of how Dylan was in that time. And yeah, deservedly so.
Christian Bale plays Jack Rollins. His segment is in like a documentary style. It's like we're watching a documentary, and this is about the early part of his career when he begins writing original traditional music, original folk music, using traditional stylings, traditional folk, but writing original songs, which was very innovative at the time. And this is where some of his most well-known songs going to come from, like "Blowing in the Wind" or "The Times They Are a-Changin'." Christian Bale. It's funny. It's so funny. Like most of this cast, specifically Heath Ledger, Kate Blanchett, and Christian Bale, and Ben Whishaw, are just doing a Bob Dylan impression, right? I mean, that makes sense. It's a movie about Bob Dylan, but
I mean, I wouldn't say
also,
is Ben Whishaw. Do you think Ben Wishaw's doing a Bob Dylan impression?
I think so. I think this speech pattern, I think, is definitely modeled after him. I mean, he's not using his natural accent. He's got the hair. I think
no.
they're all doing a Bob Dylan impression, but they all still feel different from one another. It's fascinating to me. Yeah, Christian Bale. I love this segment because I love the way they did the documentary thing, and I really love I guess we'll get to her in a moment, but Julianne Moore in this segment is so freaking good. But I love this. Like, this is maybe my favorite era of Dylan, just musically. So I like exploring the space. We see a pretty extended performance of The Lonesome Death of Hattie Carroll, which I really enjoy. And Christian Bale really plays two eras of Bob Dylan. They just chose to make it the same character here.
Which is what I think is so interesting, because like every person is kind of like a snapshot to an extent.
Right.
Bale's kind of one of the only ones where his part of Bob Dylan sort of bookends the Jude Quinn character. Because like the Jude Quinn is basically the character in between Jack Rollins and Father John. Because Jack Rollins is up to the decision to go electric, basically. And then Father John is the post-electric version, if I'm remembering correctly. You might be able to. But so it's interesting to me that character is given those two distinct portions. And then obviously the Jude Quinn arc essentially exists in the middle. Whereas obviously Jack Rollins is portrayed as kind of like just disappearing until he becomes Father John, which is obviously not what happened with Bob Dylan. He obviously had a very similar public faux pas moment like Jack Rollins did, but then just pressed on and faced no consequences because he's a white man. I'm kidding, folks. Do not. But
That's
I just thought that was an interesting choice.
It's another choice by Todd Haynes that I'm sure he has a reasoning for that I can't say I quite understand. But you have the distinct era of early Dylan and the distinct era of when Dylan was a born-again Christian and did 2 gospel albums, which is nobody's favorite era of Dylan musically, but there's clearly a reason that he wanted that to be the same character. Like, he sees that version as an evolution of this version.
I think so. I think that's it. I think it's as simple as that. Like the isolation into the born again Christian, which is unfortunately a very common tactic by people who get canceled nowadays. It's a little ahead of the curve there. But I think that idea that like his moment that leads to his isolation kind of resulting in him finding God and embracing that side, and that performance of Pressing On is really good too. But I think it's as simple as that, where like that evolution, I think from a just on paper perspective makes a lot more sense than just being like, yeah, he had a faux pas moment that withdrew him from the public until he did something even more notorious, essentially, which is like, it's funny that he's like comparing himself to Lee Harvey Oswald was seen as less controversial than going electric. And it's like, I don't know how the world works, but that's apparently how it was. But it's like, you know, I'm willing to forgive the comparisons to A Man Who Shot the President, but I draw the line at going electric. You draw what? But no. So yeah, the Christian Bale performance very limited. It's really just a couple of scenes. It's just like that scene where he performs the original song that I can't even remember the full name of.
The Lonesome Death of Hattie Carroll, Andrew. How can you forget that?
And then he has the scene at the dinner where he makes the comparison of himself to Lee Harvey Oswald, and then he has the kind of born again Christian scene later. And I think that's so it's very limited, but and he's obviously not singing in the segments when he's performing. I don't know that any of the actors are actually singing any of these. Except
Marcus Carl Franklin is.
Marcus Carl
he might be
actually
the only
does.
one.
But I think it's very interesting that so that's a little bit of what breaks it for me to an extent, is that like they're all doing Dylan impressions, and then when they sing, it sounds completely different.
Sure.
And it's like, but and I was originally going to grade my performances on who looked the most convincing while faking playing the guitar. But they're all about the same. Some are better than others, but Kate Blanchett, not great at faking playing guitar. I'll say that. But it's but I do like the Christian Bale performance here. I think it's the perfect kind of presentation of it, but I do like it quite a bit.
Heath Ledger plays Robbie Clark. And I love the little connection here where Robbie Clark is an actor who plays Jack Rollins in a movie. And we kind of see his life. So like, they clearly exist in the same world, even though they're never directly interacting. And speaking of doing an impression of Bob Dylan, Heath Ledger, as Robbie Clark, has a lot of mannerisms of voice of Bob Dylan. But then in the movie, he plays Jack Rollins, and he's doing probably like the hokiest Bob Dylan impression, like intentionally, because he's an actor playing a character in a movie. But I really like that scene that we get to see from Grain of Sand, I think it's called, the Jack Rollins story. So this is exploring Bob Dylan's personal life, specifically his marriage to his first wife, and how it slowly deteriorates. They in this movie allude to Vietnam as a long, prolonged failure, eventually imploding, which is, you kind of see the parallel play out. I guess a couple things I want to say about Heath Ledger's performance here.
Mm-hmm.
One, is very good. Considered for the Mark Strong Award. Honestly, part of the reason that almost gives me pause is because he's such an ass. Like it's not the best qualities of Bob Dylan being portrayed here. Hard to root for him, but of course he plays it phenomenally. I gotta be honest. So Heath Ledger, I always loved. Probably 10 Things I Hate About You is the first thing, for sure, first thing I saw him in. So that's 99. And I was like, I'm going to follow this guy's career because I love what he's doing so much, even in that, silly teen movie. But I think we've mentioned this on mic before. Like, you and I are probably one of a very few people that saw like The Order or The Four Feathers. I mean, like everything this guy was doing, like he pops up in the Patreon. I'm like, oh, it's Heath Ledger. And it takes a while, and eventually he kind of makes his way to critical acclaim. Things like Brokeback, this movie here, of course, The Dark Knight, and it tragically ends up being the end of his life. And it's just one of the biggest, from a career standpoint, what ifs in Hollywood history, as far as I'm concerned. I mean, I think he had a talent like a Philip Seymour Hoffman, where it's just like they can do absolutely anything. Love watching the guy work, but there's always a bit of sadness watching him in a performance and like knowing how close this is to the end and how tragically and almost senseless his life comes to an end. I don't know. It affected me much more watching this than something like The Dark Knight, probably because like the makeup detaches you from the person.
There's a detachment from Heath Ledger when you're watching The Dark Knight that's just not present in movies where he's just kind of still acting, but like you see his face, you see his emotions. And especially when that character is somebody who's like clearly like battling demons, having struggles, and it's just kind of like, it makes it feel a little more real than The Dark Knight, where you're just like, yeah, you're the murder clown with the weird fish. Batman's gonna punch you in the face, man.
Have you seen Monsters Ball? I think I've brought this up before. Have you seen the movie?
Yeah.
All right, look, spoilers for Monsters Ball if you don't want to skip forward.
22 years old, 23, 21.
So Heath Ledger's character is the son of Billy Bob Thornton, and they have a very strained relationship. They work together as prison guards. And early in the movie, Heath Ledger asks Bob Dylan, he says...
Bob Dylan.
Billy Bob, can you blame me? Heath Ledger asked Billy Bob Thornton, he said, "Did you ever even love me?" And he takes a minute, he looks at him, and he says, "No." And Heath Ledger says, "Well, I always loved you." And he pulls out a gun and shoots himself in the heart and kills himself. It's just like one of the most bleakest things ever. I have not watched that movie in a very long time. I probably never will. It's just horribly bleak in a way that is hard for me to go to these days. But I often think about that. I mean, that's one of the most just depressing exchanges I've ever seen. And with it being Heath Ledger, I'm sure it hits even 10,000 times harder now. But anyway, yeah, Heath Ledger in this movie, absolutely phenomenal. This is probably the aspect of Bob Dylan's life I am least familiar with, because I don't really care to dig into people's personal lives if I admire their music. It's more the artistry I get obsessed with, but I don't read about his marriages and stuff. But I know enough to kind of see what they're doing here, and
it's an interesting approach.
Plays out nicely.
I think it's definitely another kind of I won't say off the wall, but it's definitely an odd structure, because Robbie Clark is playing Jack Rollins in a movie about Jack Rollins, where Jack Rollins is an analog for a specific era of Bob Dylan. So you're like several steps removed from Bob Dylan at this point, but they're using that story to tell this version of basically the collapse of Bob Dylan's marriages in that era of his life. And I don't know that I try to engage too heavily with personal lives of musicians to a degree. I think there's a point where, like, you know, if you're going to draw the line at, like, I won't listen to a musician that has cheated on a spouse, it's like, wow, that list is going to shrink very, very heavily. I think there's degrees of offense to an extent. I'm not going to pretend that I have any kind of real logical reasoning, but I know that there are things artists can do that will make me suddenly be like, okay, I need to not do this anymore. That has definitely happened. But if, you know, the extent of the collapse of Dylan's life is, you know, whatever it was, there's a lot worse out there. Not to say that if anybody else decides that that's a deal breaker for them, I'm going to fault them for it. But it's an interesting approach to kind of filter his personal life through this many filters, because it kind of removes the music from it to an extent and kind of makes it more about just like the opinions of the person and things like that. And I don't know how much of that is accurate to how Dylan really felt, or if this was how it was really going down, or if these were the real opinions that he held. But it's all just meant to portray a certain particular event period of his life. And I think in that regard, it does it very, very well. And again, in a very unconventional way, by having it be told through the actor playing the analog for the folk period of Bob Dylan.
Richard Gere plays Billy the Kid.
Richard Gere, Jesus.
Seemingly that Billy the Kid.
Yes.
This is probably
not
the most...
Not seemingly. He very much is. Like,
well, they do this weird thing where, like, the time period is unknown. But yeah, I mean, as far as the movie's concerned, he's the outlaw Billy the Kid, who faked his own death and has lived into old age in hiding under a pseudonym. This is probably the most abstract story. This is probably the hardest one to connect the dots to the real person of Bob Dylan. I kind of just see it as any period where Dylan has not recluded, just pulled away from the spotlight or being active, kind of laid low. And this is all about, like, Richard Gere looking at the horizon, knowing he's going to be pulled back into this life that he's run away from. So there's probably more specific parallels, but I see it more as like a general way that Bob Dylan has never really retired or walked away from it. I mean, he's literally touring to this day, which is
If you want to call it that.
Playing live shows. I don't know if he's doing like tours, but
he's not like, Frankie Valli levels yet, but I do kind of hope he packs it in before it's sad.
Before he drops dead on stage.
They're just sad performances. Like, there's just a point where you can't do it anymore. But
I mean, it literally sounds, and I'm going to say this because I don't think it's not due to like a health problem, but it sounds like it's hard for him to talk, much less sing these days. But whatever. I'm going to tell Bob Dylan he shouldn't be playing live music.
Do whatever he wants.
I'm
seeing Bruce Springsteen next month, and I'm like, I better get this one in before there's any like deeper decline on Bruce Springsteen's voice. So
it's funny you say that because like I've never, not that I have like an official bucket list, but I've never really considered seeing Bob Dylan live to be on there. I would certainly like to. I actually had a chance last year and didn't go, but I just know I'm not going to get from it. I can't travel to the 60s or 70s to watch him. Like I know it's not going to be the thing. It's just like there's ability to say I've seen him would be the driving force, and Bob Dylan tickets are insane. So I just don't know if it's ever gonna line up.
Oh yeah, I bought 2 upper bowl tickets to Bruce Springsteen in Chicago, and it was like well over $400, and that's like sitting at the top of the freaking building. Yeah, there's a point, when the Monkees reformed. Oddly enough, there's a Monkees song on the soundtrack to this movie, but it's that surprised me when it happened. I was a little taken aback.
Little Leo point?
Yeah, a little bit. But do you know where it was? Do you know the Monkees song, Chris?
I know it because I think I read it, but it's during like the Beatles part, right?
The gallery scene where he's talking about how he's a millionaire now.
Oh, yeah.
A Monkey song during the Beatles. Hey, Chris, the Monkees were a huge influence on the Beatles, right?
Yeah, I know.
But anyway, this Billy the Kid part, I want to get back to this real quick because this is very interesting. Because obviously it is riffing partly on the fact that Bob Dylan was in Pat Garrett and Billy the Kid, a revisionist Western film by Sam Peckinpah that stars James Coburn as Pat Garrett and Chris Christopherson, who's the narrator of this movie, as Billy the Kid. Now, obviously, he doesn't play either version of that. He doesn't play either of those characters, but it's an easy thing to point to. But yeah, there's a couple of things here that I think we're pointing to, which is the one, we're obviously drawing that analog to a kind of when Dylan was relatively high profile, he showed up in this movie as a relatively big supporting character, reminded everybody why he shouldn't act. But it's, and I think we're kind of dialing into one, we're dialing into that idea of like the kind of being a recluse to an extent, which the Jack Rollins character also does. But just that, like, when you get to the end and he's still like, obviously the outlaw nature of it plays in as well. Just the fact that for a great many periods of his time, Bob Dylan was seen as this person that was kind of like kicking back against the established order. He was being very disruptive. So that idea of being an outlaw, I think, also plays into it. But then, like you were talking about, just that general idea that, like, in a way, the battle's never done. No matter what, a little bit of an Unforgiven type situation of just like, you're never going to be done with this sort of thing. That work is never finished. And
that's clear when Pat Garrett, who comes back into his life, is played by Bruce Greenwood, who's the same actor that plays the journalist in the Kate Blanchett section that is constantly trying to pin down Bob Dylan and kind of seen as his rival. So the same actor is playing the rival to the Bob Dylan analog in 2 different parts. And whenever they come back together face to face in the Billy the Kid part, it's sort of his past coming back and drawing him back into this life, which the segment ends with Billy the Kid getting on a boxcar, riding off into the horizon, paralleling what we saw at the very beginning with the Woody Guthrie character.
Leaves his dog behind, though. What a prick.
He tried. I don't know. The dog ran away, and then the dog couldn't catch up to the train. What's he supposed to do? You can't stop the train, Andrew.
Just catch the next one.
I don't know.
Whatever. Anyway, it's Richard Gere. Yeah, a very interesting... Yeah, this one's definitely possibly the most esoteric because it really feels This one is like at least in the sense of Heath Ledger, he's playing the character based off of Bob Dylan. With this one, really, like it truly is like the most detached version. Like there's no immediate analog to Dylan in any like obvious way. And I think that's possibly the most interesting thing about it, is that it really is meant to just be like, here's Billy the Kid, and here is just this random thing that's almost entirely operating on theme and metaphor to establish its connection to the larger story. Sounded convincing. Excellent, Andrew.
Lastly, for the main cast here, Ben Whishaw plays Arthur Rimbaud. I'm probably saying that wrong, but in my synopsis, I said he's a poet. The movie never explicitly says that, but given that his name is literally that of a famous poet, it's kind of what I assume. And we never see who's interviewing him or what questions they're asking. We just see his responses, many of which are pulled, unsurprisingly, from actual Bob Dylan interviews. In fact, I have this book up again, and right here, even on the back cover, it's one of my favorite Bob Dylan quotes. It's in the movie. He says, "You don't," and I'm not going to do a Bob Dylan impression, sorry. "You don't necessarily have to write to be a poet. Some people work in gas stations and they're poets. I don't call myself a poet because I don't like the word. I'm a trapeze artist." It's this constant, like, nonsense, but in a way that makes you go like, what does that mean? Is he a trapeze artist? Does he see himself? Does it mean something deep, or does it mean absolutely nothing? Which is his MO entirely when it comes to giving interviews or talking to journalists, or talking about what his songs mean. He will speak as if he's giving you the answers, but you try to dig into it. It's like, well, what are you talking about? Something that is hilariously parodied in Walk Hard. Speaking of, there's that segment that's directly mimicking Bob Dylan, where he sings that song that's just, I don't remember the lyrics, but they're just utter nonsense. But yeah, Ben Whishaw, he's just a little cheeky, giving these answers, and he's kind of got the only segment that's not really a narrative story. It's just spliced in throughout the movie, almost at a non sequiturs, and it's just something that is continuous throughout Bob Dylan's life with his non-answer interview answers. So we don't see like a narrative arc here, but I love Ben Whishaw, alum of the show from Cloud Atlas, maybe, possibly. Got my Mark Strong award there. Obviously, there's no way to check or know for sure. Might make him the only Mark Strong winner in this cast, but that's just because this is a really good cast that really is in like well-regarded movies, so we haven't talked about him a lot before. Yeah. But
Richard Gere hasn't come up a lot in this podcast.
No. Yeah, Ben Whishaw, voice of Paddington himself. Voice of Paddington, voice of a generation.
Well, apparently Bob Dylan's manager specifically said, don't call him the voice of a generation in your pitch to him. But Ben Whishaw is actually playing Arthur Rimbaud, who is a real French poet, which I think is interesting. It's another interesting kind of legacy.
But do they, I don't know if they call him Arthur in the movie, because we never hear the person asking him questions. And so I don't know if he's a character named after a poet or if he is the poet. You know what I mean? I don't know if it even matters, honestly.
It probably doesn't, but the wiki links me to the Arthur Rimbaud page, so they're clearly wanting to draw that line. But,
yeah.
But anyway, it doesn't really matter. But it's obviously, again, it's a choice, though. Like, this is an active decision we're making regarding this film to kind of lay out and kind of dive into these situations. But it's just, again, it's a movie that basically isn't content to just take any kind of easy way out in any of its versions of Bob Dylan. And that alone is enough to respect the movie immensely for the effort that's being put in here. And like you said, this is something that, like, you know, you could look at something like this and be like, oh, why couldn't you do this for like every musician? And the thing is, this doesn't work for every musician. It wouldn't work for every musician. The same way the dark and gritty superhero movie doesn't work for every superhero, because you have to play to the situation. With somebody like Dylan, where there are so many different kind of evolutions of Bob Dylan, I think it's much easier to do. Not easier necessarily, but it's definitely something that you could take a format like this where you have different people play the different versions of him, and you can play with that a lot heavier and have a lot more creative freedom in it. But like, if you were going to make a movie about Sting, it wouldn't be like this. It wouldn't, I love the Police and I love Sting's first few albums, but there's just not nearly as much of a breakdown there. With Dylan kind of existing in so many spaces, this obviously becomes something that's much easier. And if I had a nickel for every film Heath Ledger was in at the end of his life where he played one version of a character amongst many others, I'd have 2 nickels. But
that's interesting. So you're talking about the Imaginarium of Dr. Parnassus?
Yes. Because they're all the same guy.
Right.
He just changes his look every time he goes into a different space.
That was a rewrite because he died. That wasn't the original intention of that movie. You've seen that one?
I wish you had glasses so that you could go actually and push them up on your nose.
I know. Did you see that one?
I have seen it.
It's interesting. I can't say totally works, but
Terry Gilliam is
given the
somebody
circumstances,
Terry Gilliam is somebody that I struggle with because obviously I love Monty Python. And the thing is, when you watch Brazil and then you watch Monty Python, you're like, this is not the same guy. There's no way he's the guy that did both of these things. But and it's interesting that while in Monty Python, he's kind of not seen as one of the major voices. He's that's obviously Mike, John Cleese, Eric Idle, Graham Chapman, even Michael Palin to a lesser extent. Terry Gilliam and Terry Jones kind of exist a little bit more in the background, especially in the movies. But their influence and their input is still massive. And then from a filmmaking perspective, careers that followed, Terry Gilliam, I think, is the one who's gotten the most press there. But or the most notoriety, at least.
Gilliam did this movie called Tideland that I saw.
Yes.
Who's that? Jeff Bridges? Who's in this?
I think so.
Who's in this?
Because he did Fisher King too. Isn't Fisher King him?
And Jeff, it's such a bizarre. I'm not recommending it. It was just so bizarre. I think it was on a movie channel or something. Jeff Bridges is literally half asleep the entire time and just muttering, and it's just, to me, nonsense. But he also did The Brothers Grimm. What a weird filmography. And in looking this up, I saw on his Wikipedia page under controversies that he says he identifies as a black lesbian. So probably don't want to read up anymore in his personal life.
It definitely has fallen into the okay boomer aspect a lot. Definitely. But yeah. Should we talk about scenes now that we're an hour and a half into this?
Probably. I mean, there is some supporting cast that I do want to shout out, but I think we can do it in scenes as we get to their segments. Really fun casting and great supporting performances. But first, Andrew, first things first. Let's dive into the scenes, specifically our favorite scenes. We're going to start with the best scene of the film, or at least our personal favorite. So, Andrew, in your opinion, when is this movie firing on all cylinders, and what is the best scene in I'm Not There?
A scene that really jumped out at me, and I'm a little surprised that it did because I wasn't expecting it to, is the funeral performance during the Billy the Kid sequence when the casket is put up on display and that music performance is playing.
It's my favorite performance in the movie.
It's obviously not as narratively important as some of the stuff that's portrayed here. Obviously, the Dylan electric performance at the folk festival is here. Obviously, there are plenty of big moments that are all portrayed here throughout this. But if I'm looking to the moment that stuck in my head the most, it was that. It's Richard Gere. His dog has run away. He's gone into town. He's realizing that there is something is wrong, basically. He has gathered that something is off, and he's not entirely sure what it is when he first gets there. And then eventually, through the variety of circumstances, he finds out that Commissioner Garrett, who turns out to be Pat Garrett, is going to basically demolish this town to make room for a highway. Another classic folk trapping, the demolition of society for the sake of business. Pave paradise and put up a parking lot, as Joni Mitchell once said. But But there's this performance in the middle of it, and I don't exactly know the song or who's performing it. Not sure
That
if you know off
is
the top of your head.
Jim James, the lead singer of My Morning Jacket. So if you've never listened to My Morning Jacket before, you should check him out, Andrew.
And what's the song?
The song is Going to Acapulco.
Very, very good performance. Tremendously good. So good, I didn't know what it was called. But it's, and like during the performance, this woman who has died is like, they literally put her casket like on display with the flowers and everything in it. And it's this very like powerful sequence where you're just kind of it lands because there's a gravity here that's being portrayed. And Richard Gere really just reacts. He's not obviously heavily involved with this, but the weight of what it's implying and the weight of what it means for this segment is very evident. And so there's lots of great sequences in this movie. There's a lot of great moments, but this is the one that in my head stood out the most. And so I got to pick it. I got to go with it.
Yeah, wonderful. This movie does a thing where, I mean, it's full of Bob Dylan songs. That Monkeys song might be the only non-Bob Dylan song in the movie.
Which is why I was a little surprised.
For the diegetic songs, there are covers. It's the character playing the song or a famous musician. And then for non-diegetic tunes, it's the actual Bob Dylan songs. I think that remains true throughout the entire movie. So this being a performance in the movie itself, it's being performed by someone else. Like I said, it's Jim James. It might actually, he has a backing band there. That might actually just be My Morning Jacket. That might be his band. I'm not sure. I just know for sure that's Jim James. Very distinct.
The
voice.
soundtrack lists it as Jim James and Calexico.
Okay, I don't know.
So I'm guessing
that's
it's
his usual
not
band.
My Morning Jacket.
My Morning Jacket, by the way, play on words, in case you haven't caught it the past 5 times we've said it out loud.
What's the play on words?
Well, it's similar to the Blink-182 album, Take Off Your Pants and Jacket.
Not following.
You'll get it when you're older, Andrew.
We've already
Yeah, this
established I'm never going to be a man after we watch Dr. No, so I don't know what else I can do at this point.
This is we didn't watch Dr. No, Andrew, but
having watched
point
it
taken.
together, like
Yes,
when
yes,
Sean
yes,
Connery is 32 in that movie, and we're both just like, oh god,
I know. It's truly absurd. I love his performance. I agree. It's super powerful. And I love just the imagery of this town. Like it's freak show-esque in some ways. There's this crazy thing where like the zookeeper has either been killed or fled town. I don't remember. But because of that, there's literally wild animals walking around. There's this great shot with just a giraffe in the background. Clearly this town has its own tradition for funerals. Don't know if it's based on anything in real life, but Jim James has this like crude face paint on as he sings this funeral tune. It's a wonderfully weird, powerful part, and gotta respect you shouting out your favorite musical performance as your favorite scene, because hey, that makes a lot of sense for a movie like this. For me, I'm also gonna go with a musical performance in a way. I'm going to go with the Jude Quinn segment set to Ballad of a Thin Man, which is one of Bob Dylan's most... It's a very famous tune of his. It's a weird one. It's sort of the embodiment in musical form and song and lyric as what we're talking about with the interviews, where it's like very vivid imagery, and it's a mix of, does this mean something deep, or are you just messing with me? And that's kind of the point of the song. I mean, the chorus is there's something going on here, but you don't know what it is, do you, Mr. Jones? It's like almost mocking the either listener or the critic for trying to read into these verses anything deeper than the bizarre imagery that it is. So it's a pivotal point for Jude Quinn versus this. Does the media, is Bruce Greenwood's character? I'm sure they have a name. Let me. Keenan Jones. There you go. Yeah, Mr. Jones. Bruce Greenwood, voice of Batman and Batman Under the Red Hood, one of the best Batman animated movies out there. Shout out, Bruce Greenwood. But
Love of the show.
he's a reporter that doesn't buy into Jude's nonsense answers and really pushes them when they're real flippant about, yeah, I don't care about that. I'm not, songs can't change anything, and is really adamant about you can't possibly believe that when so much of your career has been built on protest songs. Are you really turning your back on people? Are you just trying to be elusive? In fact, it's really summed up in this great line where he says, you either care about nothing or you care a tremendous amount that people think so. I love that. It really pins him to a wall. Like, do you care about nothing or are you just really obsessed with like people thinking you're dark and mysterious and don't care? Put a lot of effort into this. It's like almost like putting a bunch of gel in your hair to look like you just rolled out of bed. That's kind of the metaphor I thought of.
Yeah, I love that line too, because one, it applies to like, it's the age old line of just like, I don't care, but, and then they proceed to give a very long explanation about how much they care.
Right.
Where it's just like, but if you didn't care, you wouldn't
comment
anything.
on it.
Like
exactly.
that's to not care is to not comment on it, because that's what not caring is. Now you can say, hey, here's what I think, and I'm not really invested in the outcome, but this is my take on it, which is a different thing. But like there is this, even now to this day, this tremendous desire by people to like apathy. They think that apathy is portrayed as like almost a virtue. Like it's cool to not care. And I think it's actually been deeply detrimental to society. This idea that, we want to, like, caring is stupid, for lack of a better way to put it. Like and I'm not pinning that to Bob Dylan by any means, but like it's just a line that even carries into now, where people or people like or it's almost the opposite, where they care so much but then won't do the things that actually allow for things to move forward. It's this kind of endless back and forth where there's this kind of constant struggle to, like I said, it's centered on that notion that just caring is stupid. And I think a lot of media in the 2000s and the 2010s, not saying that this movie's portraying this message by any means, but that was the message, really, was that caring is stupid. To care is to be dumb. Like, why would you be stupid and care about something? Or there's the idea that you couldn't change it, so caring about it was stupid. And it's like, well, cool, now we have an entire generation of people who have immense apathy towards everything, and getting them to engage is extremely difficult. So that idea of kind of performative apathy is something that still rings true today. But that line of just like, because like not being a Dylan fan, but knowing that this was a very common trend, like there's lines that the Jude Quinn character says where I'm just like, all right, it's pretentious as hell, but whatever.
Yeah.
Like there's lines where you're truly just like, all right, get over it, like move on, like figure it out. Like it's that person like you do in high school that like always had like some philosophical response, and I'm like, we asked if you wanted pizza or burgers, man. Like that's all I asked you, and you gave me an existential line about the futility of existence, and it's like, no, that's not what I'm asking you. So I love that character actually does find that line that truly does make Jude Quinn kind of like rage quit, kind of like truly is just like, all right, I'm done, I'm not going to listen to this. And it's like, are you done because you feel called out, or are you done because you're actually frustrated by what he's saying? But yeah,
I think Jude says, how can I answer that if you have the nerve to ask me that, and storms out of the car. And I think I'm trying to remember if it's Jude or Arthur. I think it's Jude that has the interview quote, which is pulled from Bob Dylan, of he's asked if he's fatalistic. He's like, fatalistic? Bankers are fatalistic. Me, I'm a farmer. Who ever heard of a fatalistic farmer? Like, turning it on the person who asked the question as if you're stupid for asking me if I'm fatalistic because I'm a farmer. But then you think about it for 2 seconds and you're like, what are you talking about? You're a farmer? Like, what does that mean? Like, then you sidestep it and try to turn it around, but it is nonsense when you try to dig into it.
There's this story that Kevin Smith tells about interacting with Prince. He tells this whole wild story about this weekend he spent at Prince's complex, filming a bunch of stuff for him that'll probably never be seen. It was never portrayed. It was never released at the time. It was never shown. Like it's never appeared. And normally Prince would make those people sign an NDA, but Kevin Smith just never signed it. So, but one of the stories is like at a certain point, Prince kind of like disappears. And it's about his new album at the time. I forget what it was called, but it had like a lot of religious aspects on it. And so like they was getting into these like heavy conversations that Kevin Smith is like, I'm not equipped to like moderate and manage these conversations and film them for you. So he goes into Prince's office, and after Prince is back, and Prince is like, hey, Kevin, what's going on? And Kevin was like, hey, can we talk? And he's like, yeah. And he like turns his computer around and he's like, these are pictures from my show last night. And Kevin Smith's like, yeah, that's really great. We could have used your help out there during like the moderated Q&A, man. People were getting pretty heated and pretty anxious. And they start talking about like how they're like, and he's like, there's people that are listening to this album and they think that you're like sending anti-religious messages. And Prince just says, if the bra fits. And Kevin Smith just goes, what the does that mean? And so I just finally like unleashes at the guy, because it's that same sort of thing of just like, you're just speaking nonsense. None of this actually means anything. And it's that same idea with Prince. I think you hear all these stories about Prince. So I definitely believe that the guy's kind of weird, but it feels almost like a little bit of like a late stage Sean Connery thing, where I think Prince realized that the weirdness was his persona and just started like embodying it and just started like leaning into it. Just because like Sean Connery towards the end, where it was like, oh, you're just going to speak like this, with like the heaviest slur you can possibly do. And that's a little bit how I feel about Dylan watching these sequences, is like, you hear these statements, and I'm not denying that the man was under immense pressure at this time in his life, felt a lot of pressure. The scene where they're like, you got to do 83 shows. It's like, 83 shows, that'll kill me, man. Like, performing, it's this immense pressure. And so I definitely understand why a person who would put like blocks in place to protect themselves, essentially. But like the way, the stuff he says, there's just genuinely, like you said, like, I'm a farmer. It's like, what the hell are you talking about? Like, what are you doing? Like even the part where he's like, I'm a trapeze artist. It's the same kind of thing where it's just like, bro, what? Like, what are you talking about? Like, it's one half like I'm protecting myself, the other half is like I'm just almost trolling you to an extent. Like
that's exactly
kind of what it is. Yeah,
that's exactly what it is. And the question is like, is Bob Dylan an ass for doing that, or like, does he owe us? If he just wants to make his art and let it speak for itself, does he owe us these interviews that define exactly what his intentions are? Like I don't think so, but the interviews are going to continue whether he wants them or not. So should he just sit there silently? Does he have a right to kind of toy with the audience? Like I don't know. There's no right or wrong here, but it's just a fun thing to explore. I haven't even back to my favorite scene. Ballad of a Thin Man plays this song that is directly attacking Mr. Jones, and we kind of see this fight play out where, to the tune of the song, dude's playing it on stage. Mr. Jones goes to the restroom, and while he's in there and the song's playing, weird stuff starts happening to him. Like, there's a bunch of other Mr. Joneses walking in and out of the restroom, and they're making eye contact with him. One of them's completely naked that walks into a stall, and then he leaves the restroom to go back to the show, but now, instead of Jude Quinn on stage, it's a freak show, and the audience is laughing at him, and he's looking around like, why are you laughing at this person? And the camera pulls back, and now Mr. Jones is the one on stage. He's the geek that's being laughed at, and Jude Quinn holds a microphone up to his mouth to be like, yeah, what do you have to say? Kind of put you on the spotlight. So like, Jude is quote unquote like winning at this point, like dressing down Mr. Jones and calling them out for never, you just want me to say what you want me to say, is the line that she says. And kind
I'm not going to be part of your system, man. Like,
yes, that but unironically. But the battle swings the other way, because we see Mr. Jones receiving some confidential, like a mail, and has an old yearbook. And at the end of the song, we see a segment on TV play out that is like a segment on Jude Quinn, and Mr. Jones reveals that their name isn't actually Jude Quinn. They didn't have a rough upbringing. They had a very normal, privileged upbringing, and their real name is, I don't remember what it was, but it's not Jude Quinn. It's a pseudonym they took on, which is exactly what happened, more or less like what happened to Bob Dylan. It was
turned out he was not born a poor black child.
Yes. I think it was Newsweek that did a biography on him and revealed his name as Robert Zimmerman. And he was just a very, came from a very average, stable family, and not the implied past that his interviews and music would lead you to believe. So it's just a big blow to Jude Quinn when that gets out. But I love, and you mentioned David Lynch earlier. This segment's probably the most Lynchian because it's just a lot of bizarre imagery. But you know what? I should probably watch more David Lynch. I know I just kind of feel like the style isn't for me, but I haven't actually watched a lot of it. Maybe I should give it a more honest shake. But again, the fact that like I can pin all this to a narrative about Bob Dylan,
it gives you a reference point. It gives you a reference point. There's at least something that when you're watching it, even if it gets a little strange and esoteric, there's still this kind of overarching thing that is known. And with David Lynch, the issue is always you don't have that backing. You don't have a reference point. Not always. I've been watching Twin Peaks: The Return on the big screen. They've been showing it at Alamo Drafthouse for the... They've actually been doing the entire run of Twin Peaks. They started at the beginning back in January, and just every Saturday has been 3 more episodes. Cool. And so I jumped in for the last 3 episodes of the original run, which was the original cliffhanger that never got resolved. I've already seen the movie on the big screen, Fire Walk with Me. And then I jumped in they do The Return, the series from about, still almost 10 years ago. God, I hate that. But I jumped in at 7, 8, and 9 because Twin Peaks: The Return episode 8 is seen as like one of the most auspicious episodes of television ever made, just for how experimental and weird it is, basically. And then I kind of was like, well, I could just finish watching it because it only goes up to 18. So I was like, well, you did 7, 8, and 9. So that's just like 3 more weeks. So I did 10, 11, 12. And then yesterday was 13, 14, 15. And then the next 3 episodes will be 16, 17, 18. So we're finally about to get... Because one of the things that happens in The Return is Dale Cooper, Kyle MacLachlan's character, gets out of the Black Lodge, but basically is in a weird trance state that he can't get out of. And so it's the most David Lynch thing possible that he brought Kyle MacLachlan's Dale Cooper back and then spends 15 episodes not letting you see him. And so we're finally at the last 3 episodes where he finally lets him be the character for like an episode and a half. But it's that same kind of thing where like even that you're just like there's strange stuff here that just feels like there's no reference point. I still like it a lot. Because Twin Peaks is one where it's odd in that there is structure to an extent because there's still like a real world. There's still like normal things in the world, but then there's just so much strangeness. And I'm actually surprised at how much it does tie back to the original because, anyway, they're getting off track talking about David Lynch. But
well, it's funny you mentioned all this because, like, I haven't watched a lot of Lynch. I don't seem to have. I've seen some of it. Doesn't seem like for me. But still, whenever I see the Twin Peaks, like, complete collection, Z to A or whatever it's called, I'm like, I should buy this when it's on sale.
I think about buying that because I have a different one I could sell for a lot more money. So I think about buying the cheaper version because I could sell the like right now it's 30% off at Barnes & Noble and it is $55 for Twin Peaks.
It's both series in the movie, right? That's everything?
All 3 series in the movie.
3 series,
so,
okay.
Well, there's 2 seasons of the original show.
Got it.
And then it has all of the return show on Showtime and it has the movie in it. And so it's for $55, it's pretty nuts. So I think about that one a lot. But because I have this weird, super expansive box set that I've opened twice and have never really done anything with. So there's just no reason for me to have it. But yeah, it's but even that, I admit David Lynch is just he's not for everyone. And I think David Lynch would tell you that. Like I don't think he had any delusions that, his stuff was for everybody. But this one, while going to strange places, like I said, still has that backing that like it's Bob Dylan at the end of the day. So there's still a reference point that you can go back to pretty regularly. That at least kind of grounds the proceedings.
Like I said, I want to make sure I shout out the supporting characters that I really enjoy. In the Christian Bale segments, again, he's like early folk Bob Dylan. In the documentary, a lot of the interview is with Julianne Moore as Alice Fabian, who's a folk singer that played with Christian Bale's character, and is clearly an analog for Joan Baez. I would like, I want to see like a spin-off about Joan Baez portrayed by Julianne Moore, because she does such a good job. And specifically, besides being just like a great stand-in for Joan Baez, she does such a good job of playing someone in this type of documentary, like talking to the camera and recalling something from decades ago. There's a great scene where she's like walking back to her chair and her cat's sitting in it. She's like, "Hey, you're in my spot," and like looks at the camera and smiles like, "Hey, did you get my little joke there?" It's so good, but she's feels so natural. Like she feels like she is a singer being interviewed about something from her past. It turns out Julianne Moore is a very good actor, I guess is all I'm trying to say here.
Turns out.
Michelle Williams is in this movie, which I don't think I knew until preparing for this podcast, because I probably didn't know Michelle Williams in 2007. And even knowing it's Michelle Williams, I don't see Michelle Williams. She plays Coco Rivington.
I didn't notice it was her ever.
Yes, who is she's another analog to an artist in like what's his name? Bill Hader from Men in Black 3.
She's Edith Post.
Yeah, what's the artist name that she worked with? Andy Warhol. Thank you. Yeah. Why I thought of Men in Black 3 before the man's name, I don't know. Yes, but she's got a different hairstyle, I guess. I don't know, but I don't recognize her, but she is sort of taunting Jude. Andrew, okay, so the Jude segment is obviously pulling a lot from the Don't Look Back documentary, and that it's black and white. It's on that tour. But also, it reminds me of, this probably isn't exactly what he's going for, but it reminds me of, what's that box set called with 5 easy pieces and head? Is it the BBC America?
Yeah, it's the BBS. It's America Lost and Found, the BBS story.
Yeah, BBS, not BBC. But it reminds me of whatever that era of filmmaking is. Very avant-garde, DIY, bizarre imagery, mixing styles, and
I mean, really, this is a sequel to Head in a lot of ways. Hence the
it's not a completely absurd comparison, Andrew. There's this great bit that is, if it's referencing anything, it's referencing the urban legend that the first time the Beatles smoked pot, it was with Bob Dylan. Don't know if that was ever confirmed by anybody involved, but they can't find Jude, and they go, "Oh, who's that over there?" And it cuts to Jude and what we can infer are the Beatles rolling down a hill in like sped up film, like even their voices sound like chipmunks, and like literally when the camera cuts over to them, there's these like pyrotechnics that go off, and they're all just like rolling and frolicking together, and like, "Okay, bye-bye, we gotta go," and the 4 Beatles all lock arms and go up the street and off camera.
I love that.
And then you hear screaming, and they run the other way with all the girls chasing them,
with a massive crowd chasing them. Very
like Hard Day's Night era Beatles. It's I don't know. It's just fun.
Yeah.
I guess that's all I want to say. It's just fun. But I think he's going for, like I said, I probably don't have it down exactly, but a certain era of filmmaking there with this segment.
I agree. That kind of rough and tumble, late 60s, mid to late 60s, early 70s style. I have a quick unrelated question.
Yes.
If I were to make a letterboxed list that was for movies featuring a dude playing a dude disguised as another dude with Heath Ledger as Robbie Clark, qualify this movie for it.
A dude playing a dude disguised as another dude because he's playing Robbie Clark disguised as Jack Rollins.
Yes.
Is that the idea?
Who's an analog of Bob Dylan.
Plus Bob Dylan is in there. This guy's the dude playing it. Yeah, sure. I'm not gonna say no to that.
All right.
Yeah.
Cool. Just
So
curious,
obviously
curious.
that would make this list 2 movies. Is there?
So far.
Okay.
Tropic Thunder and I'm Not There. What a double feature.
I'll keep some. I'll put some thought into that. See if we can't come up with any more.
I'm certain there's other movies where like somebody plays a fictional character. No, and yeah, this has probably happened more often than we realize.
How about Ocean's 13? No, Ocean's 12. Excuse me, where Julia Roberts plays Tess, but they all acknowledge she kind of looks like Julia Roberts, so she poses as Julia Roberts at the museum.
Yeah, sure.
It's like a
Up to
dude
3.
disguised as the dude playing the original dude.
Yeah, we'll accept it though.
Okay.
That's free.
I love this moment
So
where Jude is in the car and Allen Ginsberg pulls up in the sidecar
Cross.
of a motorcycle. Yeah, and it's David Cross playing Allen Ginsberg, which you look at Allen Ginsberg and you're like, yeah, that's actually good casting. Like, it's really funny that it's David Cross, but like he looks pretty like him. And they have that initial encounter, and I just love Jude like fanboying. I don't know. After he drives away, like, it's Allen Ginsberg, man, like just met like a hero. And then they meet up later, and they're like taunting this statue of a crucifix, shouting up at it. And I love when Jude says, "Play your old stuff." It's really really good. But inspired casting of David Cross as Allen Ginsberg.
Oh yeah. It always trips me up because there's 2 things about David Cross that trip me up. One is that Brian Alvarez, the wrestling podcaster, sounds like David Cross when he speaks. So anytime I hear like a Dave Meltzer, Brian Alvarez podcast or just the Brian and Vinny show, and I hear Brian Alvarez speak, it sounds like I'm listening to David Cross be really upset about what's happening in professional wrestling. And it's just always very funny to me. The other thing is that I realized that Plex does music after you told me it does.
Right.
And so I've been.
You realized it after I told you. Is that
Yes.
that's the right way to phrase that? Okay.
Yeah, sure.
I came to this conclusion on my own after you pointed it out to me.
I didn't say I came to it on my own. I just said I realized it after you told me. Which, to be fair, after you tell someone something, that is them realizing it. But I've been cataloging. I have a lot of these King Crimson box sets downloaded. These kind of complete box sets that I've always really liked because they do these things where it's like it's not just the album. It's like the live shows where they workshop the album. And like you kind of, if you listen to all of the shows in a row, you kind of see the album take shape in real time, basically. Like you watch them improv it into existence. And I just think that's a really cool thing to witness. But they're like 24 disc box sets that have like 17 live shows on them in addition to the album. And you're just kind of like, Lord. Jesus Christ. If you guys could have tightened this up a little bit. But David Cross is one of the members of King Crimson in the 70s, and I keep seeing his name pop up, and I'm like, no, that's not noted actor from Mr. Show playing violin on this King Crimson album. But yeah, it's just he only shows up in a couple of scenes, but it's pretty funny when he does.
I want to shout out Charlotte Gainsbourg, who plays Claire Clark, wife of Robbie Clark. They're the marriage that we see it disintegrating. But in addition to seeing their marriage fall apart, you also see like the early days of their courtship, which is very
hot
touching,
and heavy.
very cute. Yeah, very sexy as well. But I love whenever he buys a motorcycle and immediately like crashes it. Not seriously, but clearly can't drive it. So she has to be the one to drive it home. And once they get home, like he hops on to drive her and it stalls out and just has trouble getting it going. It's just very funny, very cute. But these scenes, considering that, there's 6 stories here, and if you actually were to count the runtime, I mean, they're 20 minutes, maybe. I feel like we see such a clear snapshot of this full relationship. It's very touching. I feel for her so much when they're on that double date, and Robbie starts just being insanely misogynistic, saying like, well, of course you think that you can change things because, well, you're a chick. And is very just openly like demeaning and, like I said, misogynistic, and it's
Yeah.
like clear to everybody that this relationship is over. Like it dawns on everyone else before it finally dawns on them. It's just very sad, very heartfelt, and anyway, I want to shout her out because you don't get there with just one person. It's not just Heath Ledger.
Nope.
It's the two of them and their chemistry, which I think is fantastic. Charlotte Gainsbourg, I know from. I hate the movie is called this because now I got to say I know her from the movie Nymphomaniac, which I've seen.
Yikes!
Yeah,
It's a movie
yeah,
that exists.
it's about what you think it is about, but it's a real movie. It's not just like anyway. She's very good in that as well.
It's a real movie in the
today.
sense that it was shown in a movie theater. Yeah,
Well, it was on Netflix when I saw it, so
she's been in a bunch of movies. She was in Antichrist. She's been in a bunch of his. She was in Melancholia. She's also randomly in the Independence Day sequel, but like, yeah, it's she was also recently in the Phoenician Scheme in a very, very brief role. Was in The Pale Blue Eye, which was the weird murder mystery movie with Christian Bale. And Edgar Allan Poe, very strange stuff there, but she's in there as well. So she's, a very long career. She's been acting since the 80s, but yeah, it's definitely these scenes are really powerful, and it's in part definitely because the chemistry is believable, and when it deteriorates, you feel sad.
Also, there is a quick shot of Heath Ledger's dong. And we on Best of the Rest always celebrate male nudity on film. Not enough of it. So kudos to Heath Ledger for help evening those scales. I think you also see him completely naked in Brokeback Mountain. So really putting in the work in that regard. That was important to bring up. I think that is the last note
Let's end it there.
I have here. Yeah, a good
Heath
place
Ledger's
to
dong. All right.
to end it. Andrew, maybe I should have asked you this in the beginning. Is it that you don't like Bob Dylan's music, or you're not that into Bob Dylan's music? Like you listen to the hits or whatever, and like, not for me? Or is there something more dramatic than that, or that puts you off? Or is it just never your thing? Like, what is it that, obviously you weren't in this movie or didn't want to watch this movie on your own without me forcing you to because you're not a Bob Dylan fan. But like, what is the roots of that? What is that between you and Dylan that's not connecting?
It's an interesting story because when you look back at the history of music and you look back at the history of folk music, you just have to understand that I'm a Rooster Illusion. For a real answer.
For once I get to be the person that leaves a long gap in the conversation after something you say.
And I stole that line from Tropic Thunder, so it's not even that good. But I when it comes to music, my favorite types of music tends to be stuff that is one like the stuff I listen to tends to be like progressive rock, like new wave of British heavy metal, stuff like that, which is very deep in its sound. There's a lot of layers, multiple guitars, synths, pianos, things like that. So the music I tend to really listen to and enjoy is stuff that has a very full sound. So when I listen to things that are much more stripped down, it has to hit me in a particular way, and Dylan just doesn't. Partly because that was me genuinely adjusting my glasses. I wasn't giving you the finger just then on camera. But
thanks for clarifying to the podcast listeners.
So when I listen to Dylan, it's just, especially the early stuff, it's like his voice and a guitar, and I can't do it. His voice just doesn't land for me. I can't really listen to his voice. It doesn't really work for me. And it's something where, like in this movie where there's covers of some of his songs, they actually hit a little bit better because I feel like I'm getting the message, hearing it in a way that's more palatable to my ears. So
I'm quoting friend of the show, Adil Rafai, something I've heard him say multiple times. is that Bob Dylan's role is to write songs for other better artists to cover, which
Yeah.
whatever. I'm a huge Bob Dylan fan. It's like the original, but I get it.
Sure.
Like All Along the Watchtower, Knocking on Heaven's Door, Forever Young. Like there's songs that are almost more famous for the covers, or people agree are better when someone else does it.
And so I've tried. I do want to make that very clear. Like I've attempted many times to get into Bob Dylan, and it's a valiant effort. And so I have nothing like I'm not gonna like shit on him. I'm not gonna be like, oh, this guy actually sucks. Like the lyrics are profoundly powerful, especially for the struggles the country and the world was facing at the time. There was clearly something that he had a very unique ability to portray through music. I just don't like that music.
Fair.
And you often say that the issue is in the execution. And I think with Bob Dylan, that's almost completely my issue, is that when it comes to the execution of Bob Dylan songs by himself, I just don't care for the final product.
It's so funny to me. I've often said, like, it's going me on this walk here. This is Johann Stretch. I am not a cat person.
Sure.
I don't say I hate cats because that sounds mean, but like I genuinely don't like them. I don't want them to touch me. I don't want to be near them. I'm not into cats. And no one's asked me why I don't like them, but if I were to describe them at one point, I might say like, well, cats are just a-holes, like they want you to come to them. They'll scratch you up. They're just, they push stuff off. They're a-holes. And a cat lover would be like, yeah, they are a-holes. I love them. Like, we agree on this, and yet I love them. All that is to say, I don't think any Bob Dylan fan, myself included, would be like, actually, he's a great singer and he has a voice that, he's not a great singer.
Yeah.
That's not why. That's not the appeal. So like I agree with you. Like he's not a good singer, but still one of my favorite artists of all time. I don't know. It's just it is what it is.
I mean, I like Rush, and not to say that Rush is like Bob Dylan. It's absolutely not. But
yeah.
I literally just opened my Facebook right now and had a friend be like, I like everything about Rush until Geddy Lee starts singing. And it's so I completely get it that sometimes there are just things that just don't hit. And just don't land. Like, these same, like I said, one of my favorite bands of all time, possibly, if I'm really dialing in now, possibly my favorite band of all time is King Crimson, because they are a band that's had many different evolutions and things over time. That if you want a truly unique, I don't know that there's any band that has a sonic palette range that King Crimson does. From the way that band starts to where it ends up, it's very, very strange. But like, nobody knows King Crimson. And like, I'm not going to go to people and be like, oh man, you know what you're missing out on? King Crimson. But thanks for the recommendation, Chris. I'll probably never watch it again.
Hey, I couldn't ask for. This is the best case scenario. Not to put words in your mouth, but I feel like, you just said it. You'll never watch it again. But you recognize the craft, and you don't think I'm crazy for enjoying it. And that's all I can hope for.
I can't. There's a craft here. There is a reverence, a respect for the work of Bob Dylan that's not just evident in the performances. It's evident in the direction. It's evident in the script. It's evident in every single piece of it. And the fact that it's not just content to be like a complete unknown, and not to say that I also haven't seen a complete unknown, but it's been kind of, Patrick Willems, I think, has the kind of video that kind of really dials into the issue with biopics for the most part, especially when it comes to music, and why things like Walk Hard, despite being a parody satire movie about them, kind of eviscerates the genre and should have closed the book on that kind of dumbed down, watered down, very generic palette formula. But then things like Bohemian Rhapsody still come through. And it's odd to me that something like Bohemian Rhapsody was so successful. It's not odd to me. It was Queen. Of course it was going to be successful.
It's not odd that it made money. It blows my mind how much it was nominated. And I'm a known Academy Awards hater, but I think it was nominated for Best Picture and Best Actor. I think maybe he won Best Actor. Like I don't know if it's nominated for Best Director. That would have been a real crime. But
I don't think so.
What are we doing? Like what are we doing? That's all I get. What are we doing?
I agree completely that but then something like Rocket Man comes out at the same time that has genuine craft and this desire to tell a compelling story and not just settle for the normal or the whatever. Like, and so it's frustrating because there is a movie out there that isn't content to follow that formula, and it gets overshadowed, not again, because it's the Queen movie. It's Queen. That's what Bohemian Rhapsody had going for it. It was the first major motion picture in ever that was just about Queen. And people wanted to watch that, turns out. And so it's this thing where, like, if you're gonna put in the work, and obviously this is obviously 2007, so this is kind of before that really kind of dials into overdrive. But you know, the walk the lines and stuff like that are coming out and are kind of living in that space of like, okay, we're trying to do it a little bit differently. And then this movie is kind of like, you know what, we're just not even going to play by the rules at all. We're just going to do it completely differently. And it works. And I think that is alone something to be commended, that they were not content to just be like, here's the greatest hits of Bob Dylan's life, which is what, generally speaking, most of the biopics are. It's like, here's the hits, basically. The movies almost exist solely to sell greatest hits albums. And it's frustrating because it feels like for a lot of characters, you lose out, or for a lot of people, you lose out on the nuance of their lives by having to tell such a sanitized version. And this is like Elton John very notoriously said, like, you know, be like, why is your biopic rated R? And he said, because my life is rated R. Like, he's like, I'm going to tell you the real story. And this is the story that, if you follow the development of Bohemian Rhapsody, happened with the Sacha Baron Cohen version of it, or the Sacha Baron Cohen version of it, is that he wanted to tell that kind of version of it. He wanted that kind of gritty, darker movie about the real life of Freddie Mercury. And the members of Queen basically said no. They were like, that's not the movie we want out there. The members of Queen, I have a lot of thoughts on and probably don't need to dive into right now. But
I mean, isn't it known that like one of the agreements was that they had to share equal screen time? So that's why there's super weird editing to keep jumping to their face. Like I think that tells you about all you need to know.
There is a driven narrative by the other members of Queen that they were just as important to the success of Queen as Freddie Mercury was. And that is the image and the narrative that they have pushed basically since he died. So there is a repeated interest and drive by Brian May and Roger Taylor specifically, not so much John Deacon, because he basically retired after the Freddie Mercury tribute shows. They have that's the version they want out there. They want the sanitized, we're all the same, we're all equal. Freddie was important, but we're just as important. That's the narrative they want out there. And so that's the movie they wanted made. And Sacha Baron Cohen was not going to make that movie. And so that's why he apparently got tossed. So it's probably, I mean, it's unfortunate, but at the same time, I don't know that movie would have turned out any better. But it's the problem. And I think that's part of it to some degree, to an extent, is that the musicians themselves just don't want necessarily nuanced takes on their lives being presented. They want, and in the case of Queen, it's even doubly more frustrating because Freddie Mercury is not here to weigh in on this. They're basically getting to craft this entire narrative, directed by Brian frickin' Singer, who apparently also had to have that movie finished by somebody because he effed off towards the end of production. But so actually, I think it was finished by the guy who did Rocket Man, ironically enough. But which is probably why the Live Aid sequence is so good, because the guy who actually has creative flair did it instead of generic palette, the director that is Brian Singer. But also there's a lot of other things about Brian Singer that we've talked about before, and none of those should be forgotten in this. But it's so for a movie like this, to get back on task a little bit,
right.
So for a movie like this that's not afraid to take a swing, that's not afraid to be like, you know what, we're not just going to do the greatest hits of Bob Dylan. We're going to challenge it. We're going to do it differently. We're going to take some wild swings. I have to respect that. And I know that if I connected more with the material, this movie would mean a lot more to me. But even without that, I can still look at what's happening here and be like, this is very well made. There is a tremendous amount of craft on display here. There's a tremendous amount of respect and just quality. Like, they are working to make this into what they want to portray his career as, and I think that is immensely laudable.
And you see Heath Ledger's dong. Just because we said we had ended on that. Appreciate all the listeners for bearing with us during this farewell tour. Like we've kind of said on past episodes, we know it's not releasing weekly. I think it's about every other week. We're trying to make sure we take the time necessary to make sure these episodes are good, as it is our swan song, and we have very busy lives, which again is kind of the whole reason that the show is coming to an end. That being said, this is truly the home stretch. There's only 2 episodes left of our show. Next week, we will be talking about a movie that you brought to the table, Andrew. You entered into the farewell tour, The Secret Life of Walter Mitty, a movie that you have evoked many times over the years on our show, a movie that I know from your stories and you bring it up means a great deal to you, a movie that I have seen once. I don't have any big thoughts on it as of right now. I'm excited to dive back into it, go back to it, and bring all the positives next episode as we take a second look at this thing, Andrew. But yeah, 2 episodes to go. I think you just probably in a segment that's not going to be on the episode. I think you just said you could record The Secret Life of Walter Mitty right now if you have to. I mean, you have favorite scene, Mark Strong, everything you like about the movie is all right there in your brain.
Mark Strong's pretty straightforward, I think. But it is, I could tell you everything right now.
Mark Strong is Adam Scott for that beard that he has?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Pasted on to perfection.
I'm excited for that one. I'd love to go back to it.
I am too.
We have 1 episode after that, which I think I should know this, but I think we haven't said what it is. Let's get through 1 more episode, and then we'll let you know how
tell you guys what it's going to be.
Wrapping this thing up. Yeah, that's it. Next time you hear us, Secret Life of Walter Mitty. Until then, just remember that maybe not every movie is great,
but all movies have greatness.
Thank you to Mark Benavides for singing our theme song. You can check him out on Instagram at NotThatMarkAnthony. Thanks to Mitch for the music. You can follow him on Blue Sky. Check out our show notes for his SoundCloud link, and you can check out our store on TeePublic for some Best of the Rest merch. And if you enjoyed this episode, please share it with a friend, because that is the only way that we grow. Follow us on social media at BOTRcast. Thank you.